Welcome. So, for this deep dive, our mission is really to get practical, to extract the framework behind building real capability. We're trying to move past just talking about grit or, surviving tough times. We're focusing on something called learned resilience. And the idea here is that difficulty isn't just something to endure, it's fuel for real transformation.
Exactly. And what's so interesting, I think, is that resilience, viewed this way, isn't some fixed trait you either have or don't. It's an intentional framework, something you can actually learn.
A learnable framework.
Yes. And the key difference is the goal. It's never just about getting back to where you were before the setback. I mean, that's just survival, right?
Right. Back to baseline.
Exactly. The real goal is to metabolize that challenge, to use it to reach new and actually higher levels of capability.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit because that sounds like the absolute opposite of learned helplessness, where failure makes you just give up. So if this is a framework, something you practice, what's the actual structure? How does it let you turn a potential crisis into, like, an engine for growth?
Well, it's designed as a repeatable cycle. 6 steps, actually, to make sure you're intentionally turning that struggle into lasting capacity. We use the mnemonic THRIVE to capture it.
THRIVE. Okay.
Yeah, THRIVE. Take on the right challenge, harvest internal resources, reframe the narrative, integrate the change, value the lessons, and then energize for the next challenge.
Okay, 6 steps. Let's maybe focus on a couple of the really actionable ones. How about the T? Take on a right-sized challenge. That sounds crucial.
Okay.
It needs real judgment, right? The sources talk about choosing something that will stretch but not break you, kind of like that zone of proximal development idea, the ZPD.
Precisely. That selection is strategic. If you're, say, a junior manager learning a tricky new piece of software that's a stretch,
Makes sense.
but trying to overhaul the entire company's supply chain on day one, that's probably a snap. Learned resilience is all about finding and navigating that specific sweet spot of productive discomfort.
Okay, so you pick the right stretch. That's T. Then you mention E, energize for the next challenge. This one feels counterintuitive sometimes.
How so?
Well, there's always pressure to deliver now, move on to the next thing immediately. How do you justify building in downtime? Isn't there a risk people see intentional rest as, I don't know, softness?
I'd argue it's the opposite. It's actually engineering for performance. That recovery, that rest period, that's literally where the lessons get cemented physically in the brain. It's where capacity gets restored. Without the E, you're just draining the battery. You run it down until you burn out. You simply cannot build capacity from a place of depletion. It doesn't work.
That makes the reflection step, V-value the lessons learned, even more critical then. It's not just about resting, but processing.
Absolutely. And this is where you use tools like maybe the 5 whys to really dig into what happened, success or failure.
To get past the surface level.
Exactly. The value is pushing past the symptoms, like, oh, I failed because I ran out of time. You need to get to the root causes. Why did you run out of time? What system broke down? That ensures the lesson actually sticks and changes future behavior.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, connecting this framework to the psychology. You mentioned the stress mindset being key. What does the research like Dr. Aaliyah Crumb's work out of Stanford actually show about how reframing stress changes our biology? Because that sounds pretty radical.
It is pretty amazing. Her research identifies 2 really distinct mindsets towards stress. First, there's the stress is harmful mindset.
Right, the common view, stress is bad.
And biologically, that view correlates with things like constricted blood vessels, prolonged and damaging cortisol patterns, generally negative health outcomes.
Yeah.
But then there's the stress is enhancing mindset. This is viewing stress as useful, as fuel, as a sign your body is preparing for a challenge.
And that changes the biology.
Yes. It leads to healthier cardiovascular profiles during stress, more functional cortisol patterns, and get this measurably better task performance and even faster recovery after the stressful event.
Wow. So what you're saying is the story you tell yourself about the challenge fundamentally shapes your body's response.
That's exactly it. Whether you perceive stress as a threat or as a signal of readiness, that narrative dictates the biological and psychological outcome.
So learned resilience leverages that enhancing mindset. It helps turn what could be a snap or breaking point into a productive stretch.
Precisely. So putting it all together, learned resilience isn't just a personality trait. It's a strategic, repeatable practice. It requires intentional challenge, yes, but just as importantly, intentional recovery and reflection. It's a system.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, navigating this THIV loop consistently actually changes your brain, right? You mentioned myelination.
Yeah, that's the neurobiological underpinning. Every time you successfully navigate a challenge and recover, you strengthen those neural pathways. Myelination is like insulating the wires. It makes the adaptive response faster, more efficient, more automatic over time.
So resilience is quite literally a skill you build in the brain through practice.
It really is. And crucially, the source material often highlights that this strengthening happens really well in groups through things like team debriefs, shared rituals, what they call communal reintegration.
Right, processing it together.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe for you listening. If resilience gets stronger collectively, what's one step you could take this week to practice deliberate, collective recovery or reflection with your own team, or maybe even just your peers?